And we'll get started. So my name is Brandy Rodriguez. I am the Membership and Events Manager at the LWV Wisconsin State Office. And I am tag teaming this presentation with Deborah Cronmiller. It looks like she may have had to pop off for a second. Here she comes. So Deborah, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us today for this important training. I am Deborah Cronmiller. I am the Executive Director for the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. I live in office in Madison, and I'm very excited to share all this information with you all.
So we'll just give a brief overview here before we dive in. We'll provide some information about who you can contact at the state office for any need that you might have. We also have a general kind of catch-all email address that you can reach out to if you aren't sure who to reach out to at the state office. And that will also include contact information. This presentation is based on the board orientation handbook that's linked in the slides. So we'll do a deeper dive into that particular document and how it's used. But please continue to reference that document all year. And also the slideshow is a great resource with tons of great links and things. In addition to more resources and where to find information, if you're looking for some specific piece of information. And then we'll talk about the new due structure, and we'll follow that up with a Q&A either about the new due structure or anything else that we've covered in this presentation. Okay, I'm trying to talk and admit people and do slides. Feel like all right, so like I said, we do have a general state office phone number and email address. Just so you know, our phone is voicemail only, so it doesn't ring to an office. No one can actually pick it up. So we're not ignoring you. You do have to leave a voicemail. And then someone is constantly monitoring that. So you'll get redirected within, a couple of hours, if that, to the correct person who will get back to you. And then that LWV Wisconsin email is, like I said, the catch-all email for general inquiries. If you're just not sure who to email, then that's a good place to start. I'll let Deborah kind of finish off this page of staff members since she's next up on the list.
Sure. Again, I'm Deborah Cronmiller, and to just give you an idea of what I'm responsible for at the State League. I do kind of spearhead all of our work in the litigation world. We have many ongoing suits at any given point in time, whether that's involved natural resources or defense of voting rights or whatever. And so I'm the liaison with our attorneys on all those cases. I'm also sort of the public face for what is the league. And so I deal regularly with the media. Molly Carmichael, our communications manager, helps establish those times and meetings and whatnot, but I do the interviews, and oftentimes you'll see my name quoted in the local newspapers and that sort of thing. I also participate actively in a number of the state board's working committees. So one of our committees is on fair maps. There's also a coalition called the Fair Maps Coalition that I happen to chair at this moment in time. I participate actively in our Impartial Justice Ad Hoc Committee, and this is work that is primarily around all things state courts. And then I am your Chief Development Officer. So I write the grants, I put the reports in on the grants that we received. I deal with our donors directly. And as you all know from attending the annual meeting, we just have approved a near $1 million budget. So this part of my job is taking up a little bit more time than it used to. So Eileen Newcomer is our voter education manager. And as I hope you are all aware, our voter services work is just so integral to our mission work. And Eileen oversees a great many pieces of what I call voter education. She is the coordinator for the Vote 411 across the state. So whomever you might have in your local organization who's spearheading Vote 411, they'll be working very closely with Eileen to make sure that their questions about getting questions out to candidates, getting the documents assembled and published, all questions that Eileen can answer for you. She will also be a resource if you are intending to hold a candidate forum in your locality, whether that's for a local race or a statewide race. She's also very much involved with helping to provide resources and information to anyone who's interested in ramping up a more assertive voter registration program in your locality. She and Molly Carmichael, the communications manager, also are responsible for getting out all of our voter resources and print materials. Lately, what we have been doing is sending a survey to all of our local league leaders, asking them what it is that they would like in the way of print materials. And then we get those things printed and get them sent to you. And as long as budget allows, we'll continue to do that at no cost to you, the local leagues. But that's always a fluid situation. So, and then Eileen oversees our very robust election observation program. We are the outside of the parties. We have the largest observer program in the state of Wisconsin. Hundreds of observers are deployed at every election, and then these observers are trained and they provide reports back to Eileen. She collates all that information, and then we create a report. Mostly Eileen, creates a report that is basically a accumulation of all of the observations, and then we actually make recommendations to the Wisconsin Elections Commissions based on what we have seen out in the field. And then Eileen with Molly is also very much involved with the design of our print materials and all voter information. Most importantly, the graphics, the slogans, those sort of things. All of that is built internally, and Eileen plays a big role in that. Delaney Zimmer is relatively new to our staff. She's about to celebrate her 2-year anniversary next week, and she's our voter education coordinator. Delaney has basically 2 responsibilities to the organization and to our many partner agencies. First, she is responsible for monitoring election mis and disinformation. This is a big job. She has assembled a core of over 100 social media monitors that help her monitor all different social media feeds, print media, for what is clearly mis or disinformation. She assembles all of this into a newsletter. Newsletters are available to all of you if you're not already receiving it, although she does guide all recipients of the newsletter with how to deal with it. So we want to make sure we have this information. It's important, but we don't want this information to get out into the public. And then the other half of her job is supporting our many clerks around the state in their task of creating enough poll workers and making sure that all of our polling places are well staffed so our elections run smoothly. In this last election earlier this week, I believe Delaney supported 186 local leagues to help recruit poll workers sufficient to do the job on the 13th. So it's a big job that she's holding down, lots of clerk engagement, lots of contacts, and we're really appreciative that we have her talents. You want to move to the next slide, Brandy?
Yeah. So I can take my job. I'm the membership and events manager at the state office. So I help with a lot of operational things, including kind of the financial reporting, which includes collecting your 990 submissions, as well as the lobbying forms and things like that, so that we are in compliance with the law. I also help us maintain our C3 status with the IRS, and that is also tied to collecting all of those materials from you guys each year. I staff the mentor program, so I provide oversight for our mentor program, which is a peer-to-peer, for lack of a better word, mentoring program. So it's if you're interested in that, it's a great opportunity just to chat with other people and get ideas and help on anything league related. I also plan the state's two big events each year, the annual meeting at the state level and also our issues briefing, which is coming up in November. So you guys should be on the lookout for some material on saving the date for those. Um, I'm also a good starting point if you have any questions on your bylaws or your nonpartisan policies. I am that super nice person who sends you your PMA invoicing so that you can pay your dues allotments, and anything else kind of related to membership management, recruitment, member development, or local league or board member development. I'm a good starting point for that as well. And then I'll turn it back over to Deborah because I think you do a better job kind of explaining Molly's position since you
Sure.
work.
Yeah, Molly, as I mentioned, is our communications manager. And in addition to all the program print materials and that sort of stuff, the design and execution of those, she also is responsible for all of our social media. So everything that you see on Facebook and Twitter, now X and Instagram, it's all been designed and created by Molly and posted by her. Though many on our staff are in the website with some frequency, it would probably fall under Molly's umbrella of responsibilities to really be in charge of the content and functionality of our website. She also is very much involved with our PIES work group that is a place where we can post our events. She's coordinating our biweekly update and that you get with all of the event postings and other relevant information for you. She does draft all of our press releases and maintains our media connection to many, many outlets throughout the state. She, as I mentioned, is involved with all of our graphic design. All of what you see that's by the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin is designed internally. So, and most of that responsibility falls to Molly. All right. Cole Torres is our new, most recently hired staff member. She's our DEI manager. And so for each of you as local league leaders, if you are interested in deepening your journey into your league's DEI work, implementation of the DEI policy, Cole will be your resource for really helping you understand. But she wants to know what your priorities are, and she'll be reaching out over the next couple of months to all of you to really help understand what it is that you want to accomplish locally and how and if the State League could provide any support for that. She also is our staff representative to the DEI committee and is a regular participant in the Community Alliances Committee or CAC committee. And then Anastasia is our administrative assistant, and that's actually too small of a name for all of the responsibilities that Anastasia has. She is our legislative committee coordinator. So she makes sure that everyone on the legislative committee has the tools and resources that they need to be tracking legislation. And so we can oppose or support different pieces of legislation. She has also taken on the task of manning our Natural Resources Committee as our staff representative. The Natural Resources Committee is a subset, if you will, of the Legislative Committee, and they are truly involved with all things environment, all things natural resources, but they are right now in the midst of planning the second go around of a collaboration with the American Society of Civil Engineers and a series of webinars that will be held this fall and winter on the report card that ASCE puts out, and all things infrastructure will be the focus of these webinars. So it's a big job, and we're really appreciative that Anastasia is charged with kind of overseeing all of that work. Anastasia also does our bookkeeping and general support to all of the staff in the office. So it's she's got a lot of balls in the air at any given moment in time.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we're gonna touch back on the board orientation handbook. This was developed by the mentor team, and the acronyms there for your consumption. It is template style, so I really am trying to encourage every local league to take this document and make it your league's own. This whole training is based on the board orientation handbook. But the board orientation handbook is also something that should be used internally at your league at the local level to do your own onboarding. It has spaces for you to put your own policies in there, to tweak it for your descriptions of officers and things like that, so that you can have a document that is available for all of your existing long-term board and leaders, as well as any new board members or leaders. And then it's a really good way to keep everything in one spot, so that, you know, for continuity and succession it's a great tool. So please take advantage of it. That's what it's for. And it's revised almost yearly. So, you know, if you want to look at revisions, then those are available when they come out each year. Something else I like to point out is that it includes a lot of links to resources that your league might find helpful just for operations, as well as oversight and those types of things. And also includes a glossary of commonly used league terms and acronyms, which I find really helpful. So maybe your board and leaders will as well. All right, Deborah, would you like to do
Sure.
structure?
Yes. Just to give a bigger overview of how the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin is structured, we have 22 local leagues throughout the state. And at any given time, we have emerging leagues, groups of individuals who are in a community without an established league, but are working together to promote league activities and ultimately to maybe form into a league. The Outside of the existing recognized leagues, we also have many members at large throughout the state. A member at large is a person who's actually signing up, not at a local league level, but at the state level and at the national level. Members at large can use the name of the league. And in fact, we have a number of member at large units that work very similarly to a local league in doing registration events or holding forums or other events. And these members at large are, and the member at large units are, you know, really gives a statewide presence to the organization, even in communities where we don't have an existing local league. And then the kind of the third way that we are participating as league is through our interleague organizations. Currently, Wisconsin is a member of 2 ILOs. And ILOs are a group of interested parties around a topic. And our 2 ILOs are, one is the Great Lakes Region ILO, interested in all things having to do with preservation of our Great Lakes. And then the Upper Mississippi River Region ILO, having all things considered about the Mississippi, whether that's the lock system or the clarity and watershed, in all things very important to the ILO. And many leagues, individual leagues, also participate at the ILO table because they too have a vested interest, whether that's in the Mississippi River or in the Great Lakes, depending on where you're located in the state of Wisconsin.
Bylaws. So this is a policy, it's a document that rules us, and it must be looked at every year. So each league, local league has its own bylaws, the state has bylaws, national has bylaws, and across all of those, the first 3 articles must be the same. So at the local level, the state level, and national level, And then the other items that your bylaws must include are a nonpartisan policy and a DEI policy. So we'll get to those in a little bit. But you should, if I haven't already said this, be reviewing your bylaws every single year. Every single year, make it a practice at the beginning of the fiscal year to go through your bylaws with a pretty fine-tooth comb. And actually this should happen prior to your fiscal year or start of your fiscal year, especially if you're going to be needing to make updates to your bylaws. But you know, it is a document that needs to have eyes on it every single year. Please don't ignore it and kind of just set it to the side as a formality. It is a living document that needs your love and active participation in its usage. And it will help provide clarity on a lot of the things that your local league does and participates in and all of those great things. So also please don't forget to put your bylaws on your website. That should be a public facing document for anyone who wants to see it. And there is a template linked here if you want to use it for any reason, for a resource for you. Moving on to nonpartisan policy. This is kind of one of those things that the nonpartisan policy it's kind of a hot topic right now just because so much is going on politically. Everything is very hyper partisan right now. And so before we kind of dive into what your nonpartisan policy is, I did just want to kind of lead with the guidance that optics matter and perception is reality. And if you are in a position at your league, especially people like voter services chair and president or co-president, you'll need to be extra careful about how your activities are perceived in your community. And the general coaching here is that if it may appear to someone to be partisan, err on the side of caution. And then again, if you need help kind of figuring out where that line is, please feel free to reach out to me or Deborah, the staff at large. We are having this conversation almost every single week. And so please don't hesitate to, double check because it's kind of a strange, unprecedented time, and people are really struggling to find that line. And so please let us help you so that you don't find yourself in hot water that you can't get out of. But so there are certain things that your nonpartisan policy must include, statement on nonpartisan nature of the organization, those guidelines on permissible activities specifically for your board members, limitations on sensitive positions. So like I mentioned, and every single year you should be going back through this so that, you're looking at maybe your new voter services chair and seeing, okay, how well known are they in the community? How much do we need to restrict activities and limit those types of things? And then a policy on how to handle resignation when a board member needs to resign or needs or wants to resign to engage in political activity. So, Deborah, I'm going to turn it over to you in case there's anything else that you wanted to say about nonpartisan policy, especially, now coming up on November.
Yeah, my best advice to all of you local leaders is to make sure that you understand that the league and you as an individual are sometimes too intertwined to separate. And that's why we ask that for important or significant positions, your presidents, your vice presidents, your voter service person who is the face of the league at your events, that these are individuals likely that if they're in a political setting, at a campaign rally or a candidate event, they might not be able to separate themselves from their individual partisanship, we all are partisan. That's why we gravitated toward the League of Women Voters. But we cannot let the league's image and our 104-year-old nonpartisan policy be jeopardized by our own desire to support a candidate or a party in this moment. And so it's very important to just know who you are, know how well or poorly you might be known in your community. In some communities, league members can just, blend into the background. In some communities, small communities especially, league members are very prominent members in the community, and it may be impossible to separate yourself from the league and your presence as a league member.
Yeah, and then this page, it provides the slideshow about developing and implementing a nonpartisan policy. You guys already, for the most part, already have one in place. This is more so a deep dive for kind of helping you figure out how to implement it in a way that is effective for your league and to really readdress those sensitive positions. And there's a worksheet in there to help you with that. So if you would like to take a look at that, both the slideshow and the template are linked there for you, and as well as the state's policy and the US policy. And this is also something that should be on your website. So the DEI policy, this is also a policy that is required for your league to have to be in compliance, and it should be part of your bylaws. The state and many of our local leagues in the bylaws have language that says something to the effect of, we adopt and comply with National's DEI policy. National did just adopt and implement a new DEI policy around January, February of this year. That is why at our annual meeting, the state annual meeting, we readopted, and so that, we presented that new DEI policy. And it does read a little bit different than the old DEI policy. So if you haven't read it, because your league has its own DEI policy drafted and does not just have that language saying, we comply with National, you are gonna wanna go ahead and read that. And I might encourage you to maybe think about just adopting the LWVUS policy. It is a great policy, and if you put that language in your bylaws, it just helps your bylaws be a little more flexible and evergreen. Um, if you are going to have your own DEI policy specific to your local league, there are some parameters and guidelines that you must follow about what the DEI policy can and cannot have. And so I have linked some resources here for you to look at if you need to do that. Some other policies that you may need to review annually include a non-discrimination policy. So this is really just for leagues that have employees of any kind. You might have some guidelines for partnering with other organizations and other maybe financial policies like a credit card policy or investment policies. And there are some examples and resources for you linked in the board orientation handbook of these policies if you want to look at that. Or if your league is thinking about, maybe drafting an investment policy, that board orientation handbook is a good place to start. All right, so your board structure and meeting procedures. Once again, the board orientation handbook has some great descriptions of officer roles. And when you take that document and make it unique to your own league, you can change the descriptions in there so that they more closely align with what your officers do. And I particularly like this page because it gives specific pages in the board orientation handbook so that you can flip to it really easily. Just a reminder that at the start of your fiscal year, for most leagues, that is July 1st. I do need contact lists and names for all of your board and leadership so that we can maintain up-to-date lists for getting out relevant information. So if you have not sent that to me yet, please do so. I keep a very detailed list that not only I use, but the whole staff. So if it's not updated with your current leadership, then you may be missing out on any number of things and from any portfolio at the state office, not just the membership stuff. You'll also want to develop a calendar so that your board members can plan ahead and set expectations for your upcoming fiscal year about, the time commitments for the board and things like that for being on the board. And then you'll also want to maybe brush up on Robert's Rules of Order. So that governs the league's parliamentary structure for conducting meetings. They do have an e-version if you want to do that version. Otherwise, a book version is also great. And if you have any questions about Robert's rules and how to run a meeting using Robert's rules, you can feel free to reach out to someone at the state office, including me or Deborah, to help with that. And, don't worry about making sure that you're doing it exactly right. If you're doing your best to try to abide by Robert's rules so that your meetings are structured and cohesive and their expectations are being met, then that's good enough. We're not going to call you and, say, hey, you didn't do this in the right order. And so, yeah, it's just there for your a resource. I linked the newly revised, and make no mistake, they will continue to revise it in case you want to give that a look over. All right.
Let me try to give some clarity about the difference between advocacy and lobbying. As a 104-year-old organization that's devoted ourselves to voter education, we do a lot of advocacy. And advocacy is everything that is providing education around our positions, a specific topic, an issue that your community is facing. So this is the core of our work, and it is funded through our C3s, and we are all C3s, and the IRS indicates that all education, all advocacy work is C3 work. So we're all on very stable ground there. Disseminating data on a particular policy and why or why not it is important to the league is likely rooted in our positions. So many local leagues have their own positions on local topics. The state has positions on statewide topics, and the National League has positions on federal topics. And so anytime we get up in front of a governmental body, whether that's your city council or your county board of supervisors, you should have full confidence that what you're saying is backed up by our positions. And you should be able to quote directly from the positions when you're making public comments or doing advocacy. That is separate and distinctly different than lobbying. Lobbying is an attempt to influence a specific piece of legislation, and we do this too. The IRS allows a C3 to devote up to 20% of its budget on lobbying activities, and the state of Wisconsin does most of its lobbying activity out of its C3. We do have at the state level a C4. It's mostly hibernated for the last 15 years, but it could be activated should we want to get more involved in a topic that, and we might exceed that 20% threshold, then we could activate our C4, fund the C4, and do our lobbying work out of the C4. The difference between advocacy, education, telling people why or why not the league is in support of or opposed to certain, community of initiative that's happening, why we support, affordable housing or Medicare for all and Medicaid for all. These are our positions. Lobbying is the act of us going in front of the legislature essentially and saying, we support or oppose this bill that you have introduced. And we use the same positions to offer that support for bills. But when you're dealing with trying to influence a legislator, excuse me, then you've crossed the line, you're into lobbying. For each of you, why this is important to understand the difference is that if you are lobbying, asking for, something to happen with your electeds, then that should be reported to the league on your end of year lobbying expense report. Because you're all volunteers for the most part, you probably have no expenses associated with that work, but you should just be cognizant that that is potentially a lobbying expense if you would incur one. If you print a brochure, if you print a flyer to hand out, something of that nature, you've incurred expenses and those should be reported at the end of the year to Brandy. But most of our lobbying expense reports come in with all zeros. And Brandy will tell you in a few minutes, even if it's all zeros, you have to submit the report. That's an IRS requirement. So I'll turn it back over to Brandy.
Oh, here's my mouse. Yes, so I will just continue on with that form. Like Deborah said, every year there are fiduciary responsibilities that your league has, and this is part of maintaining your C3. So without going into too much detail, your C3 is umbrellaed under the state's designation as a C3. And because of that, your local league is required to submit 3 pieces of documentation to me because I help maintain our C3 with the IRS. If you do not do that every year, you are at risk of losing your status as a C3. And so that includes the lobbying form that Deborah's talking about. And this pesky form, I know I know it's annoying, but like Deborah said, you must fill it out. You can't just say, oh yeah, we didn't do anything. I have to have documentation that lists zeros and says, hey, we submitted this. So please don't skip that one. It is pretty, I do get this every year where people are like, oh, we didn't do anything. Please fill it out. You have to send it to me. And I will be annoying about it. So if you don't want me in your inbox, then just go ahead and fill it out. The other things that I need are your 990, so confirmation that you are submitting a 990. Most of our local leagues have a budget that is 50,000 and below, so you guys can do that easy file. The leagues that have a budget that's larger than 50,000, they file the more robust form. Either way, please send confirmation to me. And I also need a copy of your annual treasurer's report. So please get those things to me if you haven't already. Otherwise, like I said, you'll be hearing from me. And then another fun topic about insurance. If your league does not currently hold general liability insurance, you are really going to want to look at procuring that. Each league should have their own liability insurance. You cannot use the state's. There is one caveat. If the state is co-sponsoring your event and the programming is relevant to a statewide audience and is available to a statewide audience, for consumption, then you need to have a conversation with us and we need to say, okay, yes, we'll co-sponsor this, and then you are eligible for getting that certificate of insurance for your event under the state's liability insurance. If that is not the case, you cannot use the state's insurance. And it's not us being mean, it's the policy we have. You're just not covered. And so anytime your league may want to go into a library or another public space, it is likely that they're going to ask you for that certificate of insurance. And it is risky in myriad ways not to hold liability insurance. You really do want to have that. And in spring of last year, Lisa Johnson from the Janesville League, who does insurance for a living, was really kind enough to do some sessions on how to get insurance in your area if you haven't already, why it's important, and not only that liability insurance, but also directors and officers insurance. And the difference is directors and officers insurance protects your board members from personal financial liability in the event of a lawsuit. So getting directors and officers or D&O insurance is a conversation that your board needs to have amongst one another to make that decision. But again, though these insurances are not provided by the state. So Lisa has kindly offered to be a resource if you need help finding someone in your area, or just a starting point to figure out how to get insurance in your area or what's a good rate. And I can connect you with her if you reach out to me. She's been really gracious with that. These 2 session recordings also go over in more depth, why you should have insurance and those types of things. So please view them at your leisure. Deborah, do you want to do program planning?
Sure. Program planning or your local lively issues is an integral part of what is League. Our positions are the product of our studies, and study and program oftentimes are words that we intertwine. But what we are asking each individual league to do on a regular and ongoing basis is to review our positions and your local positions and the national positions for thoroughness, for relevance, view them through our DEI lens, and, words that we may have used 50, 60 years ago when we studied an issue might not be the words we want to use now. And so those are the kind of things that we could suggest an update to a position, or just a whole out, let's restudy this whole thing. I think times have changed and the position we're holding is not right for these times. And then the program making packet that Brandy will send to all of you has different forms in it, but the general idea is that if you want to make a change to our positions, you would make that suggestion in a form that will come back to the state board, and the state board will decide whether or not we want to advance that study idea to the whole membership for approval, or whether we don't want to recommend it. And so if you've attended annual meetings, you've heard these terms: recommended study, non-recommended. And that's how that happens. Boards have to decide, the state board decides, the national board decides, and ultimately your boards will decide whether or not you want to advance these ideas for program making. The program making session, the lively issues, is done at your local level, but you need to be somewhat mindful about how to lift it up, how to get it off the ground. Program planning is not something you want to wait until 2 minutes before the form is due, because you'll probably want to engage many of your members in kind of delegating different positions to them for review, maybe individuals who have more subject matter expertise with regard to some of the different studies that we have conducted, some of the different positions that we hold, and allow them to make recommendations to your own board about whether we want to hold this position, maybe update the position, or maybe restudy the position, or maybe we want a whole new study, as we approved at the National Convention just months ago, about, we don't have the right positions right now at the national level to talk about federal judicial ethics. So we need to study that. We need to get that into our national positions so that we can be timely and topical in talking about ethics at the for our Supreme Court. So that's how the program making happens. Again, the program making packet will come to all of you. Do take the time to review it. Have your boards talk about lively issues and making sure all your membership are invited, and the strategy that you want to take for making recommendations that out of your own board to the state board and to the national board.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to mention that some of the most frequent feedback that I get about this is like Deborah's saying, it is a big undertaking if you're looking at all of the positions. And we realize that different leagues have different capacities. And so, each year maybe you need to batch them. So if you decide to kind of just take 10 a year or even 5 a year, you can do that. You don't have to do every single one every single year. That'd be great if you did. But we understand that that is a time commitment. So you can rotate them if you want to every year. Find a system that works for you. We would much rather have your eyes on 3 positions every year than just not doing it because, it's too overwhelming. And if you need help making a system that works for your league, please reach out. I'm happy to help with that. And we're gonna make it work for you. So I'll leave it there. Um, I'm going to go over PMA and PMP really quickly. These acronyms definitely floating around right now. Per member assessment is your dues invoice that will come from the state. Per member payment is the one that will come from national. I just sent out PMA invoices within the last couple of weeks. So if you didn't receive it, please reach out to me. Your member count is calculated as of January 31st. So you are gonna obviously have a PMA and PMA invoice for this year, which really is from last year. And then you will have another one for fiscal year 24-25. That will be the full PMA, PMP invoice because they're gonna take that snapshot of member counts on January 31st. And then somewhere down the line, National has been talking about prorating and things like that. We don't really know what that's going to look like, but just to reiterate, you will have, this PMA and PMP invoice that just went out, and then you will have one more full PMA, PMP invoice. So please plan accordingly, budget-wise for that. As a reminder, your full payment on the invoice is due before the state annual meeting, so that your delegates can have voting privileges at the annual meeting. This system for PMA and PMP won't exist anymore with the new dues system. So, just, we're all going in the same direction, but this is one of the great things about the new system is that you won't have to deal with this anymore. The dues the dues allotments will be split and dispersed in real time. So you won't have to do this system anymore. As kind of a reiteration of some of the things that we've been talking about with the due system, if you haven't been able to come to any of the office hours that the US has, or any of kind of the other conversations that Deborah and I have been holding, this is a general overview. The dues are going to all be collected through the one interface. So National has selected Chapter Spot as the platform for that. And as you can see, there's a Chapter Spot resources page that the US League maintains. It is kept relatively up to date. It has frequently asked questions on it. It has timelines on it. So please go there first for any questions you have. That's where I get all of my information. So I don't have any information that's not on that page. To also reiterate, you do not need to purchase anything new. There's no cost to you for this new system. You don't have to change anything that you're doing. If you have Club Express, you can continue to use Club Express. It will work on any website. You don't have to get anything new. So I know that that's a concern, that has been a common concern. Um, if you are wondering what the split will be, the 33% to national, 47% will come to state, and 20% will be maintained at the local league level. Anything that goes through that portal, so a lot of members will join at a higher level so that they can make an additional contribution during their join or renew. Um, we are encouraging leagues to start messaging to members, maybe not to do it that way, because if they send their contribution alongside and with their member dues, it will be subject to that split. So you're only going to be receiving 20% of that additional contribution. We would really want our local leagues to maintain 100% of donation contributions. So it's important for you to help your membership get ahead of this new system and message that they need to do it in two separate steps. So you're going to want to have your own donate button that is separate from the join and renew button. And you're going to want to say, hey, join renew here. But if you want to make an additional contribution, please use this donate button so that you can keep 100% of that donation. Stripe is the credit card processor that US has chosen. No, you cannot keep PayPal. You cannot keep any other credit card system you've been using. You will have to switch to Stripe. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, which just went out of my brain, I can't remember, but I might remember after I turn it back to you guys for any questions that you have, either on this or on anything else that we've covered. We have about 9 minutes here, so wanna take questions while.
Brandy, I will just read out loud. Annette put in the chat a question. So her question is, so as treasurer, I have to pay the entire invoice I just received, as this is really paying for last year. And then we'll have to pay 6 more months before the new system starts.
6 more months before the new system starts. I'm not sure I understand the
I
math.
think the answer, if I'm understanding everything from National, is that we will have the invoice that you were just received, and then you will have another full year invoice that you will receive next year. Starting in the go live time, there will be a porting of all the members that were of record on January 31st into the new system. What we don't know yet, and because National has not provided this information yet, is how they're going to do that prorating. So you will be given credit for some of the dues that may have already been received by your league and what may be received in the national portal. So it will, I think, it's going to look messy for the first year, maybe year and a half of going live. But then everything should be settled down and all dues will go through the portal. All dues will be divided by the formula as it's been stated. And PMA will be taken essentially at the moment that dues is paid. So there won't be additional PMA invoicing because the system is already giving National their portion right when the dues are being paid to Chapter Spot.
Yeah, and just to say this out loud, Beth asked if a league could add Stripe for paying dues and keep their PayPal for separate league donations. Yes, you can do that if you want to do that. Are there any other questions, either about the new dues structure or other things? I did want to mention that you are totally able to attend the LWVUS office hours, specifically on the new due structure. And they list those in that chapter spot resources page. You do kind of have to sign up and register, but then you can go and ask your questions directly to National. So, and I think Brigitte from yesterday's session said she was going and there's one next week. So
On
you
the
might want to hop
21st.
on
Yeah,
the 21st.
Wednesday, the 21st.
So definitely a good opportunity to make your voice heard and get your questions answered if you want to talk directly to the source. Dorothy?
Two things I wondered if you might want to mention. One is about explaining and encouraging participation in the state league standing committees, legislative, DEI, natural resources, who might be interested and how they'd get involved. And secondly, could you address just a little bit about sending delegates, local leagues sending delegates to state and national annual meetings?
Well, I can take the delegate question. At national, our delegates are determined by formula based on the number of members in your league. And there's always 2 delegates per league that are a given. And then for every additional 50 members that your league has, you are awarded another delegate. So, and that will give you the amount of delegates you can send to a national convention. The state, on the other hand, has changed its approach toward delegates. We believe that any person who has the desire and is able to make their way to an annual meeting, whether that's a virtual participation or an in-person participation, should be allowed to vote. And we changed our bylaws a number of years ago to reflect that. So any person present is a delegate at an annual meeting of the state's league.
Yeah, and so Dorothy, to answer your question about how people can get involved on state committees, there is a committees list, which I think I linked in here, but if I didn't, I will link it in the slideshow. People are welcome to check out the website. Our state website has that list of committees and gives some overview of what we kind of do in those committees. And if there's a specific topic of interest, and people just aren't really sure what committee might be working on some things, they are welcome to either email that general email inbox or email me. I'm happy to connect people with the correct staff member or committee chair to help them kind of do advocacy work that they're interested in. Something else, and I remembered what it was from the last page. So I did find out that they, for the new due structure, are getting rid of the household option. That will not exist anymore. Every single person will have to join or renew as an individual member. They also are getting rid of the student category. It's kind of being absorbed into the pay what you can sliding scale. But the absolute floor has been set at 20. So someone has to pay at least $20 right now to become a member. We, as the state league and also many local leagues, realize and have pushed back pretty heavily on this. We think 20 is much too high, especially because some leagues have been waiving fees completely so that people aren't barred from participation. Despite that pushback, it still is at 20. Deborah, did you say at convention there was some more conversation around that particular topic?
Yes, there's ongoing conversation, and this would be a good reason to participate in the national office hours. So you could also articulate your desire to allow that scale to slide to 0. And the exception going forward for the $20 minimum would be our 50-year members. There will be no dues payable for a 50-year member, and they will be considered full voting members of the organization.
Yes, and I do know that, and I'll cover this more in depth for roster manager training, which will occur probably in September sometime. There will be a way for roster managers to go into the back end and get reports and things like that. We just don't have a lot of clarity about the nuts and bolts of things yet. So again, if you have those types of questions, it's a good idea to go to LWVUS office hours. We are at 1 minute till. I see Jane is asking if Eileen is go-to for Vote 411, and the answer is yes, absolutely. Is there any other burning questions that you guys would like to ask before we hit the 11 o'clock hour? Okay, well, I don't see anyone with hands raised or unmuted. So again, if anything comes up, please feel free to reach out to us. The slide deck is available to you. The recording will also be made available to you. And thanks so much for attending. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great session.